Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lore Watch, a roundtable freeform discussion about lore in your favorite media. I'm your host, Joe Prez, one of several lore-focused folks from Blizzard Watch, and I've got my stalwart companions with me today. First, Matt Rossi. How are you doing today, Matt?
I was playing Diablo 3 today, and the Altar of Rights, man, I forgot that existed. So it was like, what is this? What's going on? I got sucked into a portal, and it was like, I forgot the story basis for this. And it turned out that there is no story basis for it. That's why lore is important, people, because if you don't know what's going on, and there's just portals everywhere, it's confusing.
Portals, a real strange way to run a universe. And also joining us, our newest companion in addition to the podcast, Eric O'Day. How you doing, Eric?
I'm good, and I'm wondering if Midnight comes out later this month. Is it 11:57 Azeroth time right now? Are we at 11:58?
Ooh, maybe. I feel like it's this giant doomsday clock that's just kind of like Ian Dornegal at this point.
For me, Azeroth time is like a suggestion. Like I've gone to zones and it's nighttime in those zones, and it's not nighttime in the zone right next to them. So I feel like it can be midnight anywhere at any time in Azeroth. You never know.
If I've learned anything from the Night Elves, it's that time is relative. With that speaking, we're going to be answering some questions from you, our wonderful listeners. If you have questions for this or any of our podcasts, be sure to send those in to podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that it is for in the subject line, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. If you want to hit us on Discord, you can go ahead and do so. We have the Q and Podcast Questions channel, which we ask for you to do the same thing. Give us your name, special pronunciation, and what show it's for. If you are a Patreon subscriber, you get access to the Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel, where we tend to look there first as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on. With that, folks, let's get into the first one. This one comes from Octomos. A bit niche, but the harp housing decor in Midnight have me wondering about the history of instruments in Azeroth from a lore lens. There are likely a lot of parallels between what inspired in in-game cultures when it comes to this, I'm sure, like Tauren and trolls with drums, but elves having harps has me wondering about things like the violin and the ocarina, which were in the Shadowlands but maybe nowhere on Azeroth. Some tracks can be triggered in places by talking to bards, so we can assume the instruments used in the triggered tracks are canon to exist in Azeroth. I have strong opinions on this, so I'm going to let you guys go first. So, Matt, thoughts?
I like the pretty. I don't really know what to say on this one. I feel like Tauren and trolls having drums and elves having harps. I mean, I feel like they both have both. Just because we see Tauren with drums a lot doesn't mean they don't have other musical instruments they play. It just feels like they would. They would certainly at least have some wind instruments because they have giant horns they blow sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like everyone has individual, like only these people have musical instruments of this type. As for the violin and the ocarina, I feel like we've seen violins at least on walls in Azeroth before. Like, I know in human houses, I'm positive I've seen them. I seem to recall one going all the way back to Dead Mines. Like in the house that you go down into and you end up in the Dead Mines. I feel like that house had like some musical instruments going around there. And we've seen people playing the thing. So yeah, I don't feel like it's as restrictive as maybe the just shorthand that they use in the game. Like having Tauren and trolls play drums, it's a quick way to make it seem trolly or Tauren-y. I remember seeing dwarves dance around and play those. I don't want to say an accordion because it's not a full accordion, but they play like squeeze box type instruments.
It's like a concertina type thing.
Yeah, so I feel like there are instruments that other people have.
Eric.
Thank you for this question, Octomos, because this is my favorite kind of question where I got to do a ton of research and I didn't know what I was going to find.
The great, isn't it?
And coming from a physics background, when you think about music and musical instruments, they're just ways to make air move around in specific ways.
Music is just
instruments.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same. Music is just applied mathematics.
It's physics that sounds good. Yes. If you hit something, it's a percussion instrument, your drums. You can use strings to vibrate the air, so all your string instruments, or you can blow air through some sort of tube, your wind. So I feel like at the basic level, like all the cultures have got drums and just simple horns, war horns. There's 1,000 horns items in World of Warcraft. There's a lot of basic like the lute, the harp. Like once you get towards harp, you get a little bit more specific, and that might be more towards like a night elf. There's so many whistles in game. So that probably doesn't qualify as music, but there's whistles for everything. Once you get as specific as the golden sax, so I guess there's a saxophone in game you can buy from a vendor in Tazavesh. It doesn't do anything; it's just a gray item. But there's a piccolo that dropped all the way back in Stratholme. Did you guys use this or know?
Oh
of
yeah,
it
it summoned the guy to come. Yeah, for the priest.
I never hit that max level in all the way back in the day, so I never experienced those original, like, there's no mitigation of someone annoying you with this item over and over again every minute cooldown. My favorite one, there are 2 didgeridoos in Azeroth.
Mm-hmm.
So you can find one in Sholazar Basin. The Gorloks give you one, along with other instruments like horns and drums. You have to go play a didgeridoo on top of the 4 mesas in Sholazar Basin. And there's one in the alternate universe, the Realms of the Season of Discovery. There's a didgeridoo that drops from the Scarlet Enclave that summons a beast for you in combat. So every culture has their own interpretations of the basic ways to make music, and I didn't get too much into the differences between the cultures, but there's a lot out there. And of course we couldn't talk about instruments in World of Warcraft without talking about the fact that there is a thrash metal band. Elite Tauren Chieftain has a drum kit, a guitar, a bass guitar. There's a 12-string guitar in game that was for a Dabble anniversary event. There's the Face Melter. There's the Arcanite Ripper.
I mean, I've got the Ripper. I've actually used it.
I was going to ask you if you got the Arcanite Ripper, and I was pretty sure the answer was going to be yes.
I mean, I've got the Ripper on my human, ironically enough, not my undead. But you know, I hit people with it in the day. It's a good weapon for smacking people, and it kind of makes a musical noise.
Especially after they did the one that you can hit people with the guitar version of it, and it made a bong noise.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so music in Azeroth is actually something that I have very strong feelings about in a positive way. Each of the races of Azeroth, all of the heritage that you run across, do draw inspiration from either a Tolkien-esque background or a real-world equivalent. And some of them are more on the nose than others. Pandarens and going through Mists of Pandaria, it's very much based off of traditional Chinese culture. So you're going to have a lot of wooden instruments. You're going to have a lot of guzheng, zongruan, dize, eru, pipas. You're going to have that type of music, that type of style of audio, and you're going to see those instruments reflected in the world on top of their drums and hand drums, which I believe is also an item you can get in the game. One of the trinkets in Mists of Pandaria is literally a hand drum. Some of the others are a little less obvious. Do you know what culture inspired the Nightborn? And I'm asking both of you because this is fascinating to me.
I don't.
I think I did, but I have not retained the information.
That's okay. So they were actually based off of a classical French background, which is why when you go into their areas, a lot of it is based off of the extravagant masquerade balls that were, at the height of aristocratic France. You have a lot of these chateaus, which is why a lot of them are referred to as chateaus, the Bordeaux, where the wines are produced, but it's also influenced in their music. You go through those areas, you're going to hear more Baroque-esque style music than you do elsewhere in the game. This does include things like harps, harpsichords. You're going to have more gentle chimes and bells. It's going to be more delicate and ethereal, and that is absolutely intentional. And if you go back and listen to classical French music, especially during the Baroque period, you're going to hear a lot of similarities through it, and it is reflected in game as you go through the houses and see those musical instruments. We've already covered the Tauren. We've already covered orcs and trolls. Orcs also draw in like the shamisen and a bunch of other stuff from Japanese culture, which a lot of people, I think, have forgotten about orcs. They really do herald back to that sort of like samurai-esque route. And if you go back to some of the original artwork, they weren't just barbarians. They weren't just this angry horde. They were skilled craftsmen of war. They were essentially samurai and shogunate that had, soldiers underneath them. And that was also reflected in the music that they played. Yes, there were horns and there were drums, but you go back and listen to some of the music in Warlords of Draenor, and go back to listen to some of the music in original Burning Crusade when you go to some of the orc settlements. While they may have forgotten some of it, go to Nagrand and listen to it. And you're going to hear a lot of that sort of Japanese influence being drawn into it, especially with like the
Honestly,
burning blades. Go ahead.
You just made me think of something. I think first off, I think we've actually missed that the Nightborn are more Gascon than they are French.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring that up is because there's Spanish influence in their music.
Yes, but also
Gascony is a part of France. So
is.
it is French, but it's right on the border to Spain. And there is Spanish influence, I think, in the music the Nightborn listen to. But also you had me thinking about when you're talking about the Japanese influence, I think we're ignoring the Tibetan.
There is some of that as well. Yes, absolutely.
Like the throat singing type stuff that they do. They don't fully go for it, but there's a lot of that.
But you do hear a lot of that when you go into Mista Pandaria and go to the Yongal areas.
Yes, absolutely. Which is interesting, but the Tibetan cultural aspects are always going to be somewhat, I don't know how to put it. There's always going to be a little bit of being careful with that because China doesn't like it.
Yeah.
And for that matter, there's a lot of Mongolian stuff that I think we don't get to really focus on. The Yongal in particular, there's very Mongolian influenced, in my opinion.
I would agree with that statement. And some other ones that I do want to call out here as well. Not that I want to roll through, but I don't want to. I can spend an entire episode talking about music in Azeroth, and I don't want to just run that into the ground. But we also have like Gilneas, definitely the Victorian England style. So you're going to have a lot of the musical instruments you would find during that time frame.
Did you feel like it was circus inspired, like almost like a calliope or something?
A little bit, because that was very popular in Victorian era, as I'm sure you know, Matt.
It felt like the Dark Moon stuff was the Dark Moon. What is it called? The Dark Moon Park? I want to call it the park. It's not the park. It's like a show, carnival, right?
The Dark Moon Fair.
Dark Moon Fair. Thank you. Dark Moon Fair and Gilneas feel close musically, possibly because of the whole thing they did with the playing card game Hearthstone when they did the Witchwood. It felt like the Witchwood kind of brought the two sounds together more, but they were all using kind of stuff like calliopes and so forth. As you very correctly pointed out, the calliope was huge in Victorian England.
And even beyond that, like you'll also have a music box type feel to it as well, because one of the things that Victorian era households had a lot of, and if you go back and look at it, yes, they're known for having like this collection of tchotchkes and like having a very sort of like lavish and collector interior to their home, but music boxes were ever present. And while music boxes have been popular throughout time, during the Victorian era, it was impossible to find a household that basically didn't have one in every room in the house. And so a lot of the Gilnean music, you'll hear that tinkling, that sort of like the metal tines of it being sort of wound through. I encourage you to go back and listen to some of the music in the original area.
Music in the video part, when the first time you see Worgen come through the window, that's actually got a pretty deep organ influence to it too, like the kind of giant church organs that they had in a lot of Victorian churches at the time. I remember that being really strong, just that blasting through the window and that kind of like sonorous note to it.
Yeah,
which I had not thought about. So as we're doing this, he's making me remember my musical training, and I don't like it.
We have others as well. We can talk about some of the allied races too. Void elves are interesting because they draw from all of the other elven heritages, but they add to it, from my standpoint, a very interesting musical discordance, right? They essentially shift on the circle of fifth and bring themselves down into lower keys, minor keys, and add slight distortion and off sync echo. And so if you go through and listen to like the Void Elf recruitment stuff or any of the Void Elf areas, you'll see like strewn about, there's still these elven instruments, but when you listen to the music, it's this sort of just slightly out of phase, slightly out of perfect harmony, slightly sonorous, and I really enjoy that is sort of how they sort of I guess thematically atmospherized that area. The Draenei have a lot of chimes, which sort of comes in with their, and this is going to sound really weird. Um, Russian traditional instruments, at least from what I remember, are a lot of very sort of like high pitched, short reverberance stringed instruments, and like things like chromatic accordions, and things like that that sort of have almost like a chime like feeling to them. They don't ring out with the same sort of sustain that other instruments do. The music is very punctuated with these very short, very crisp, very strong bursts of sound. And also you add the wind instruments like the shepherd's horns and tambourines and drums for like the subtle like rhythm in the background. Go back and listen to the Light Forge and go back and listen to traditional Draenei. The Draenei hold on to that. Like they really do pay homage to sort of like that Russian traditional sort of music. And then the Light Forge elevate it by making it more sonorous, making it more sort of like echoey, bringing in a higher aspect, and they also pitch it up where they're using more sharps. They're brightening the tone to reflect sort of the light influence on them. And we can go even further. Like the Culterans, I think, are pretty. If you don't know what they're based on, you haven't been paying attention. They very much are like drawn from the British Isles, but they also, like Matt was pointing out, with the Nightborn pulling in some of that Spanish influence, there is a lot of the Spanish influence as well in the Culturan music, because again, Spain and England had a lot of overlap during that time frame when they were at sort of like they were at war with each other for a very long time. Then they were trading partners for a very long time, and they were close enough that their cultures exchanged for a very long time. So you see elements of that in there, and you see some of that with the sea shanties, like Roll the Old Chariot and Spanish Ladies. And then like you have that traditional folk music brought into it, which is also great. The Dark Iron Dwarves and all the rest of the dwarves in general, you'll hear sweeping strings, drum beat punctuations. You'll hear emphasis on chorus, and then you'll hear emphasis on drone instruments, right? I'm not just talking about just bagpipes or like the wild hammers, but you're going to hear
there's a vocal turn too. Their singing tends to have kind of a, I almost want to say Gregorian chant like aspect.
Very much so.
Yeah, it almost feels a little Russian. Not what we think of like the the theme of Tetris or whatever, but that older Russian music that feels it's like very grim, but also very sonorous. It comes at you. It doesn't just sit there. It's like Peter and the Wolf in a way. I remember listening to that, or anything by Tchaikovsky, really.
Yeah.
Just there's a lot of that there. I think you're right. I absolutely think that's there.
And then the Zandalari Trolls, which I do want to call out because I'm feeling sort of emotional about what was on display today. You hear it like it's a pastiche of Mesoamerican, South American civilizations. So you have like things like clay flutes, rattles, shakers, and percussive instruments that are not just drums. And then when you do have drums, you have stuff that reckon back or harken back to like the Tepanazli. And I'm saying that absolutely wrong because I'm not from that area. But it's a very distinct sound. And when you go back and listen to it, you're going to hear a lot of that. You're going to hear specific types of like almost like pan flutes, like which sort of go back to like the Incas. You're going to hear Columbian America style music, right? Like it's this very classic, very old, very much rooted in native heritage that you get to experience. And then going back to the Tauren also go back to a Native American heritage with their musical choices and instruments. It's not just drums. You'll see things like small flutes made of bone. You'll see horns. You'll see shakers and rattlers and beads on things. Like some of the stuff hanging in the Tauren area, they're not necklaces. Like go into some of the Tauren homes and you'll see like loops with beads hanging from them. Those aren't necklaces. Those aren't like bracelets. Those are things you like in traditional Native American heritage, you would put around your ankles while dancing to make shaking noises, to have that sort of like that particular style of percussion to punctuate the dancing. I know this because my older sisters are Native American. They used to play WoW and they absolutely loved it. So tons of really great stuff here. And I think in terms of lore, while the individual instruments sometimes are tied to questing, they are more often tied to giving the heritage that you are playing a rounded feel. And it's part of the reason why some of us resonate, in my opinion, here with certain heritages the way we do, and why they call to us some of our ocular or orally or whatever. I can never remember the word for it. The way we hear things, oral. The way we hear things influences what we sort of gravitate towards, and this is one of them. But it does such a job of rounding out and making them feel like complete cultures. I have talked for a very long time. I apologize. Is there anything else you guys would like to add to this?
Just as a parting thought, you bring up the fact that when you go to an area in the game, that's what you hear is what your character would hear. And I never really thought about that on a conscious level. And it doesn't apply everywhere. Like it's when you're climbing up the storm peaks, you don't hear that haunting melody because you're outside and there's no music. But when you go into an inn, when you go into a village, you'd probably hear that music like drifting from someone's house, or there's someone sitting, they don't put it in the game, but somebody is sitting in the corner playing a lute or a harp or something. So I'm going to be thinking about that in the future, because I also love all of the music in the game. We're going to have a couple new zones to go explore. We're going back to Quel'Thalas to see what kind of music is going to be there. So I'm interested to keep thinking about that going forward.
Me too. Matt, anything to add before we move on to the next one?
I was just thinking about how interesting it is that you talk about the Zandalari being Mesoamerican, and I don't disagree. But it's interesting that Zandalari music, which is considered to be ancestral, is Mesoamerican, but the Darkspear music is heavily African.
Yeah, very much so.
And that's something I hadn't really thought about how different that is. And the fact, for that matter, like the Amani and Gurubashi, who we've heard quite a bit, mix the two pretty aggressively. And I never really thought about that
almost
the
like they were an empire that had assimilated the other cultures and put it into their own, harkening back to real world parallels. Yeah.
I just hadn't really thought about it in terms of like there's a kind of like almost Jamaican / Haitian sound to some of the stuff that you see in Zoloman, some of the stuff you hear. Whereas I'd say the Gurubashi, especially when you go to Zul'Gurub, that place sounds like seriously like African vibes.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it is interesting to think about. I don't have a lot of concrete conclusions about this, but I do think it's interesting.
So this is me encouraging you all to really pay attention to the music the next time you're going through, not just Undermined, which absolutely slaps because goblins are absolutely jazz musicians, but go through and listen to the music and think about its place in the heritage or that zone that you are in and why it ties with them, because these are not like random choices by the musical team. Like these are being composed with a very specific goal in mind, and it's something that I've always loved about this game more than some others. So there you go. This is you got a lot of me today instead of Matt, but we're going to change that now because I think we're going to move on to some of the next stuff. This is another question from Exonite, who we answered a bunch of last time. We didn't get all of them, so we're going to try again. Do you believe there will be worldly changes due to the void influence from Midnight, like when Cataclysm came out, or maybe an old raid or dungeon getting taken over by the void due to the ley lines being underneath them? Eric, what do you think?
I always love updates to the world. We're getting the Quel'Thalas, and I think based on it's not even live yet, based on the reaction to that, they, maybe they had planned it a whole time, but now we know we're getting all of Northrend revisited. We're going to see what's going on there, how the land has changed, how the people have changed, and thinking about with Voidstorm coming and the armies of darkness descending. Like where else on Azeroth could be changed? And I think it could be kind of cool to have not like a whole nother zone be taken over, but yeah, like a raid or a dungeon or a location or a bit of story. I mean, we haven't revisited zones that much, but we do get quests that send us back across the world to do different stuff, to check in on things. We've had that for a long time, so it could be cool to go and revisit places like unexpectedly that might have Xalatath attacking the Sunwell, but some small contingent of our forces are going to be going for the Tomb of Sargeras or somewhere in Dire Maul for some random reason. So I think it's a possibility that there could be some void takeover of something, and I'm kind of interested in Ahn'Qiraj and the fact that the sword is so close. Is Cthulhu's influence still relevant since we're kind of talking about so much void? Could Cthulhu be revived? Is there anything active there? Like, we really haven't seen much of that area, and it's been decades. So what's been going on there? So I don't know. If we know the sword's going to come back in, and it seems like not bringing Ahn'Qiraj back to at least a little bit of it would be kind of like, I guess it was fine in there. I guess we did a good job back in Classic.
Matt.
I do not think it's going to be like Cataclysm. They learned a very valuable lesson from the revamp of Cataclysm, which was that if you do a revamp that gets rid of things people want, you're going to end up having to make WoW Classic. Like, that's just a fact. When they did the world revamp, is the world revamp good? Yes, in many ways it's very good. I liked being able to fly around. But nevertheless, when you make drastic, permanent changes that get rid of things, and that's what Cataclysm did, the one that always comes to my mind is like Desolus. Desolus wasn't a particularly well-traveled zone. People didn't love it. It had a few quests and a few experiences that were integral, but otherwise it was a pretty empty place where stuff just happened. And they thought, well, this will be great. We'll revamp this. We'll change it. Nobody will notice. Everybody noticed. And everybody was unhappy. And I don't think they're going to do that. There's lots of other zones where you can see the same thing. Feralas has it. Thousand Needles, big time has it. And I don't think they're going to do that. Do I think they're going to do zone revamps? Yes. I don't think they're going to do them the way they did in Cataclysm. I think there will be a lot more of stuff like you this is how it is when you're this level and you go back and you start it, whether that's through phasing, whether that's through other means. But I definitely think it's going to be the old stuff will still be there, and you can see it or you can see the new stuff whenever you want through some mechanism once you've started it. I mean, we've seen that before with like Battle for Azeroth when they changed Undercity and like that whole area. They eventually, like, they had a character from the Bronze Dragonflight who could switch the zone back and forth for you so you could do the stuff that used to be available there. I think it'll be closer to that. I don't think they're going to change a bunch of stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if they did do something to a couple dungeons, though, because that seems to go off a lot easier for people. Like when they changed Scarlet Monastery and then changed it again, people seem okay with that. And, you know, like when they changed Upper Blackrock Spire, people didn't really seem to be that upset about that either. So I feel like it's possible they will do it to a dungeon. I just don't think they're going to do a Cataclysm-style revamp to the world where everything is gone and changed forever. But I definitely think they will put in switchable zones where you can see the new stuff. I don't, like, when we go to Northrend, it's not going to get rid of Wrath's Northrend. It's just going to be another version of Northrend we go to later. That's my take on it. That's how I think they're.
So I'm going to give a little bit of a mild spoiler warning, just because I'm not going to go into too many details, because I do want everybody to experience it. But I will give a warning. So skip the next like 2-3 minutes, and come back if you want to be completely surprised by midnight. We know things are going to change. We know that there is going to be an element of the world shifting based off of some things that have been shown in game, as well as some of the achievements that have been data mined for what's coming, or at least what is present on the beta. So we know that stuff is going to happen. That means that we're probably going to have some influence of the void, at the very least, in Quel'Thalas, and in that region. And I mean, we don't know what the extent of that is going to be yet. Now, That said, we are in a better position than we were in Cataclysm for something like this. Well, I agree with Matt, and I don't think it's going to be a full world altering item and a complete revamp. Cataclysm definitely maybe did, while I think it improved some stuff, like Matt said, I think that it could have potentially been handled better because it just got rid of so much other stuff. But we have phasing now. And in matter of fact, we see it already with certain zones, like where we have a giant sword sticking out of the world. You can go back, talk to one of the bronze dragons, and they will take you back to a world without a giant sword. We have that in several of the areas of the game now, which means we have a mechanism in with which both things can be true. So you can have a world that is ever changing and updating based off of what is happening in game and likely will happen to a certain extent, but you don't delete everything because you allow players to go back and experience the zone without those altered changes. And I think that's really important. Part of what made Cataclysm Cataclysm was there was no going back. Once it was done, those zones were done. It was a complete world rework before phasing became a thing. And I also think it was partially responsible for why phasing becomes something they invested so much time, effort, and money into, right? Like it means you can have your story go forward and not be completely like shutting out everybody who maybe doesn't want to see that zone. Like, so that's my 2 cents. Again, I think we are going to see some world changes, but it's not going to be anything like Cataclysm because we're always going to be able to flip the world back. Anything else to add, gentlemen?
I also think that there's going to be continuations of stuff continuing. Like we know that Last Titan is going to have, like Northrend gets a revamp. There'll be a new Northrend. I think that's going to keep happening. They know it works. They tried it in a limited basis for Midnight. It got a really big positive response. They're embracing it for The Last Titan. And I think we're going to eventually see it happening again on just other zones of Azeroth that we've been to. And I think it's going to always avoid the Cataclysm throwing things out. They just aren't willing to do that anymore, and they don't have to. Not just because of phasing, although phasing is a really big example, but because there are other ways to do revamps that don't necessarily change the zone very much. We can still go to like Alterac Valley and still see it the way it was, like without even like thinking about the PvP stuff. Not Alterac Valley, sorry, Arathi Basin.
Mm-hmm.
The actual zone, the Arathi Highlands, is still there. It's got its Cataclysm revamp, but they didn't change it when they changed it for Battle for Azeroth. It's still accessible without Battle for Azeroth stuff. They kept that confined to the I forget what they called them. The not raids nor PvP, but like PvE PvP.
Mm-hmm.
What do they call them? Battlefields? I don't remember.
I don't remember.
I used to run them all the time, and that's really embarrassing. I don't remember them. But regardless, that there seems to be the focus with how they do world changes, that they try to preserve what's there so people who love it can still have it.
Yeah, I agree. And I can't think of much that they've taken out of the game completely since Cataclysm. Like they learned that lesson hard.
Yeah.
To say, okay, well, even if we revisit a dungeon and it's changed, you can still just get into the old dungeon if you just want to see it without all the tentacles in it and you want to run it for the old transmog and stuff. Like, yeah, it's going to be there. So as long as they don't run out of space on the servers, there's always going to be the old version of stuff.
Yeah, and I don't think we're going to run out of space on the servers anytime soon.
Buy more servers.
We have another question here from X Knight that I do want to get into real quick because I think this is also relevant and potentially mild spoilers ahead, or at least wild speculation ahead. I know Sylvanas went on hiatus, but I have a fun theory for Midnight. I believe Anduin will stop at nothing to get back in touch with the light and ends up getting himself killed early in mid-expansion trying to fight the void. I think Sylvanas will find his body after finding out, takes him to Bolvar, and together make him undead. I think it will become the second undead to be able to use the light and become important for the final raid. It would allow for them to possibly explore the playful relationship between the two later on for the fans who want to see it happen. I will correct you on one thing here, X-Knight. He will not, if this were to happen, which I don't think it's likely, and we'll talk about reasons why. He would not be the second undead able to use the light. He would be just the next in a long string of ones that are able to wield the light, as we've talked about many times ahead. And
Joe's
this is
trying to keep me from screaming.
Nope.
Sir Zeliak and be dragged away with a hook.
Sir Zeliak or Bishop Alonsus Fowl.
Yep.
Right? Like, we have a ton of undead that we know can wield the light. The light is not exclusive to any one race or living entity. So I want to put that to the side, and then I'm going to kick it over to Matt first so he can go and give you his 2 cents. Matt?
First off, Anduin doesn't need to reconnect with the light.
He found it already,
because
right?
he did.
Yeah.
Yes. Thanks to Farron, Lothar, he's accepted that the light never went anywhere. The light was there the whole time going, no, man, I'm right here. No, you got to stop yelling at yourself. You can't hear me over how much you hate yourself. I don't care. I'm still here, buddy. It's me, the light. You remember, I helped raise your dad that one time, and then he died later anyway. Sorry, but I did help that one time. Come on, buddy. We're here. We're both here. That's done. That's done. He is reconnected to the light. He can call upon it. It will help him. We got there. Does that mean that he might not get himself killed? I mean, he might get himself killed. He's never had much in the way of self-preservation instincts. I've had to save that boy several times. I remember one time he got a giant Shah bell dropped on him. He does not always think before he acts. I will give you that. But I don't think this is what they're going to do, especially because I don't think they want him and Sylvanas to be doing like meet cute things. I don't know how to put it. Like, I don't think they want them to have an adversarial relationship at this point. They've done that. They've had them have the adversarial relationship. They've moved past it to a degree. But I definitely don't think they want to make him... Like, you're making it sound like that old show, the Karen Gillian show, Singles. Do you guys remember that show?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think we want to have Sylvanas and Anduin doing the weird, intense dating thing that you're suggesting in this. I do not think they're going there. Like the playful relationship. I never felt like their relationship was playful. I kind of felt like it was like one person convinced the other person was wrong, and the other person convinced that the first person was wrong, and eventually they both realized they were both kind of wrong. That's kind of how I felt their relationship. Not that they were playful. I didn't see a lot of playing going on. The part where she helps get his soul, an evil soul jammed into his body to make him like a puppeted robot, that wasn't playful. Like, that's no game I've ever played. I don't want to. But I don't hate the idea of Anduin being undead, but I don't really see a reason for it either. Let me say that much. I will always be willing to be proved wrong. They can do whatever they want, but I looking at the story as it is, I don't see that to be very likely. And I really don't see Bolvar wanting to be involved in it.
I think Bolvar would potentially be upset about that if they asked him to do that.
He was like, you got to remember, when Anduin's father was missing, Bolvar was basically the kid's dad.
For a long time.
Yeah, for at least 5 years. And during that period, he watched the kid go from a little kid to almost teenager. And I just don't see Bolvar wanting undeath for anyone, much less Anduin. Nor would you need Bolvar to help you raise the dead. He doesn't have the helm. He doesn't have Lich King abilities anymore. He's just a Death Knight like everybody else there. He's just a dead person, or in his case, not even fully dead, because the fire of the Red Dragon Flake basically trapped him in a state neither living nor dead. He's another weird form of undead. And then you add on to the fact that he's hanging out with all these Death Knights. I just don't think that this is something Bolvar is going to want to do. Like, it doesn't feel like Bolvar, especially since Anduin is about the same age as his daughter that he just reconnected with. I don't see that as a move that Bolvar is going to want to do. He'd feel too guilty about it.
I would
in
agree
my
with
opinion.
That. Eric?
I think maybe what X-Knight I'm not going to speak for X-Knight. They may have been saying something else, but it made me think that Anduin would become the second entity to be resurrected via the light. As in, you'd have Kalia, And you'd have Anduin as another light necromancy being. I do think that knowing that it's possible, it's the kind of thing where we might not only see Kalia as the only example of that ever. So
But here's your problem with that. Alonsus Fowl was not raised by the Lich King or the Scourge or any of the plagues.
Mm-hmm.
He came back earlier.
He did.
And we don't necessarily know why, but the fact that Fowl was involved in Kalia's raising heavily implies that the light raised it.
interesting.
So even if we think that's what he's saying, Fowl is still a contender for raised by the light, can control, is intrinsically powered by the light. Because Fowl never knelt to the Scourge, never served the Lich King, ever.
Although, I mean, I think they largely, he never served the Scourge, but I think they largely said that he was raised during the Third War. We've never really gone back to revisit it. And some of the stuff that he says during the Kalia, quest, essentially, and their whole discussion has led to what Matt's talking about, where there's this idea that he may have woken up during the Third War, but it may not have actually been Scourge related. It may have just been the assumption. So we don't know, which I think is fascinating and interesting when it comes to. I'll kind of jump in here real quick and say that I've been on the forefront of saying that this was going to be the expansion, that we're going to see Sylvanas come back. And I think we already know, I think all of us are kind of on the same page that even before any of the devs not actually confirmed, but confirmed that she'll be back, then before we got the quest and the cinematic that sent us to the Maw, I think it's pretty obvious that she's going to be back, if for no other reason. Her home's getting messed with again. Her sisters and family are getting messed with again. Sylvanas is nothing but having strong feelings about that, which have led her to do some very questionable things in the past. Now she's got her whole soul back. She's got all the pieces of her that were left there before. She's more her old self than she ever has before. You cannot tell me, and I will say this, and I will say this right now, the greatest ranger general in all of Quel'Thas's history will not rise to the occasion to defend her friends and family. They may not like it.
Since, I agree totally, especially since the only reason she lost when she was defending Quel'Thas against the Scourge is because she didn't know that the Scourge had a traitor implanted within the Blood Elves. I mean, at the time, the High Elves. She didn't know about Drethier.
And had Drethier not been there, they would have held the line.
Yeah, they were winning. The Scourge couldn't get through the Wardstones. It wasn't until Drethier basically took down the Wardstone network that they got in. So yeah, no, absolutely.
Now, that said, I think that there is already sort of a relationship between Anduin and Sylvanas that isn't this meet cute thing that everybody keeps pushing for. And with Anduin, I don't think, also with Kalia, there's a lot of people that have been pushing for that to be his romantic partnership or partnering.
He's way too young for Kalia, guys.
He's way too young for Kalia, but also I don't think it fits his character, and it's not really what his character is about. If anything, I think that the relationship wouldn't be adversarial. Sylvanas may come back and shoot something that's trying to take Anduin out and just kind of nod to him, because she knows
what she did for his father.
That's exactly what she did for his father, but she also understands the loss that he's felt, because she has also felt it twice now, mind you, because the realization of losing her loved ones back home, but then also the second loss of losing Nathanos and not being able to find him in the Maw, not knowing where he is after that realization that he died again. She knows what it's like to feel that loss, that disconnect from who you are in a way that nobody else does. And so they may have a conversation of friendship where it's I've been where you are, kid. I get it. And if you need to look no further than what happens when you lose yourself, just look at every bad decision I've ever made. Don't do this. I can see her having that relationship with him and him coming back for that. Now, if anything, this could be an opportunity for Anduin to learn more from Illyria than it would be Sylvanas, because this is something I've been toying with a lot as well. Anduin in recent years in game has been sort of questioning self. understandably so, but he's also more open to a realm of possibilities. Could Anduin be the first one that wields both the void and the light? What do we think of that? Because that's something that Shadow Priests kind of already do it. Could he be the first one that does both as an NPC in game?
Going to refer back to 2 books now. Before the Storm and the one that's got him helping Illyria and her husband, whose name I cannot remember at the moment.
Turalyon.
Which is ridiculous. Turalyon, thank you. The one where the 2 of them are watching him and they're a little concerned because he kind of gets a little voidy, gets a little shadowy.
Before the Storm Before the Storm, and I think that was the Elegy novella. I think it was that.
No, it was the actual novel where he goes to help them. The name is escaping me.
War Crimes?
No, much later. It was like before Shadowlands.
Oh, Shadows Rising.
Yeah, Shadows Rising. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
There's just that moment where Illyria, who should know, is looking at him going, "Wait a minute, what are you doing?" And he plays it off and they continue on, but he has been shown to be able to use the shadow priest aspect of his character already. He's already been shown to be able to touch the. I would not be surprised, especially after what we saw happen to him in Shadowlands, to see him learn to be able to directly communicate with the void.
Yeah.
If anybody could do it, I mean, I'm just going to point out we know one guy who learned how to do it canonically. The Dark Father there from the last time we had the Void coming up during Cataclysm. Actually,
Benedictus.
He was formerly Benedictus. Yeah, Archpriest Special Benedictus was throwing the light around while he was working directly for the Void.
Yep.
So.
And they're trying to revive him right now in Twilight Highlands as we speak.
Yep.
So if he could do it, Anduin could do it.
And I think they're also maybe setting that up a little bit too, because in Blood Ties in the novel, a lot of emphasis is put on Illyria's not necessarily mastery of the void, but mastery of self in insulating herself from sort of the more deleterious effects of the void. Right? She doesn't hear the creeping doubt in the voices anymore. She doesn't have that fear as much anymore. It still happens, but she knows how to navigate it and deal with it now. It's now something more of a tool to her and more of a part of her than something that she has to risk taking control of her, which is why she sort of understands the demon hunters as the ways she does. They make this big deal about like highlighting that specifically, and I don't think that's by accident, and I don't think that it's necessarily dealing with her fight with Xalatath. I'm sure that's part of it, but if you have a character like Anduin or others that are able to touch the void but maybe don't have that mastery of self, she becomes their guide, she becomes their confidant, and she already knows Anduin and has an existing relationship with him from years prior. So you have this opportunity for Anduin to sort of like level up his game and understand the light has a place, but there's something here too, and learning how to control it without being consumed by it, and essentially keep the two from mixing, which I think is, I mean, not mixing, but like art fighting inside of himself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you don't want, it's sort of like what you see in like other stories about like the idea of having violence and peace coiling inside you. You don't want to mix them. You want to control them. You want to use them when they're necessary.
Yeah, it's the Captain America thing, right? Like his shield is not a symbol of just peace. It's a symbol of war and peace, right? You fight when you have to fight, and you fight to preserve that peace. So like, and sometimes you can't have peace without that fighting. And Anduin's been learning that lesson over the course of years. I think that's more likely than him dying. I think that him dying doesn't serve the story necessarily in any meaningful way that would not just be a shock value. And if that's the case, I will have some very strong words to put in a physical letter and mail to Chris Metzen. Like, Eric, go ahead if you have anything else to add to that.
I just want to say this triggered my memory of a Hearthstone deck that I used to play, a Void Form deck, where you'd play as a priest and be able to use Void Form and just launch shadow damage, but you started out the game as a light priest, and I think void form Anduin is a really fascinating concept to be able to have him, pick up on the void, interact with Illyria more and be able to wield both. And we saw in Blood Ties that Turalyon and Illyria were using light and void out of sync and canceling each other out. And so if he could figure out how to cancel out the void entities with light, or to be able to use the light and the void harmoniously, he could become a very powerful character, even more than already.
All right. Thank you very much for that question, X Knight. And then we're going to move on to one last one here before we call it a day. This one comes from Flobio. I recently have been playing the 2014 version of Shadowgate, which is the updated version of the classic 1989 point-and-click adventure of the same name. Have you played it? I definitely have, and I'm pretty sure everybody else has at some point. I noticed some things that appear to have influenced the Warcraft universe. Shadowgate appears to me to have been influenced by the Tolkien universe and D&D at the time, from a council of wizards that protects the world of Shadowgate to a knight named Uther. Always enjoy your lore conversations. Keep up the great work.
I have to jump in before Joe says anything to
right,
say Uther comes from Arthurian mythos.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
It's his dad. Or in some versions, Aurelius, Uther's brother, is Arthur's actual dad. But either way, Uther Pendragon is not from D&D or Tolkien. I cannot let this stand.
Also, Uther Pendragon was son of Constantine. Just going to throw that out there.
As was Aurelius.
Yep.
Aurelius was also Constantine. Although, no, they were actually the sons of Constans, who was the son of Constantine.
Yeah, I thought it was the other way around. Either way,
no,
the family lineage goes back. Constantine is in that line.
But importantly, that's not Tolkien and it's not D&D. Although they do appear in D&D as far back as the original deities and demigods, which I have right over there. I don't know why I'm pointing. You can't see me. And
also some of the original lithographs of Uther Pendragon do seem to be the actual information of Luther, the Lightbringer, or Uther the Lightbringer, because, they're very, very similar in character model and design as far as the original lithograph picture. I was going to say, we talk about this a lot, but Warcraft and the people who created the World of Warcraft universe, in particular, it's a pastiche. It's an homage to so many different things that influence them, right? When they created the universe, it was influences from D&D, influences from the high fantasy novels that they read, influences from the 1980s movies that they grew up watching, influences from the 70s animation that they grew up watching.
Influenced by Manowar albums that they listened to.
Yeah. All of these things play a factor in it. And honestly, that's how all of us operate, right? It's not necessarily conscious thought, but if you really break down, like if you ever do creative writing or if you ever do art, you can start breaking down your influences if you take a step back and look at it, right? Like, I paint minis and I talk about that a lot. My influence to that is actually John Blanche, and the Blanchito style of miniature painting, where it's very realistic, very dirty, very grimy, but not very high contrast. And I tend to like that. I know that because that's the art that I grew up learning, but I didn't consciously know that until years ago. It's the same thing when you run a D&D game or you do any of this stuff, you are influenced by the things that you consume, consciously or subconsciously. And the same is true for Warcraft. Warcraft has elements of it that you'll find that the Arthurian lore, you'll find D&D, you'll find Tolkien-esque elements to it. You'll also find influences straight from sci-fi writers, right? You'll see influences from, Heinlein. You'll find influences from Frank Herbert. You'll find influences from, other things such as
Jack Kirby.
Yep, Jack Kirby. You'll see influences from H.P. Lovecraft. You'll see all these things because these are the things that the people that created it consumed, and you see that moving forward. You'll see that as new people come in and have influence over it, it influences the world through their creative process. It's natural and it's beautiful. So yes, I'm sure they grew up and during that time they played Shadowgate like the rest of us did. They also played Myst and Riven and a bunch of the other point-and-click adventures that a lot of us grew up playing and a lot of us were influenced. And I think it's pretty unique because or I shouldn't say unique, I think it's pretty special because it makes Warcraft part of what it is, a little bit of everything that blossoms into its own beautiful, weird creation. So
Yeah, like even
go
when
ahead.
you see the influences, one of the interesting things is how the influences bounce. One of my favorite books is Stephen King's Danse Macabre. It's a book
Mm-hmm.
about writing horror and writing fiction, and he talks in it about how he wrote Salem's Lot by basically taking Dracula, considering it like a wall, like a giant monolithic wall, that this is the vampire novel, and then thinking about his book as like a ball in his hand that he would bounce off the wall to see where it went. Like, and there's scenes in the book like when they get to the vampire house and they realize that there's, the stairs have been cut off and a bunch of rats kill someone that's taken from scene in Dracula. And I feel like that's very visible in World of Warcraft sometimes. Like the night elves, when the night elves showed up, because there had been elves in WoW going back to before WoW existed.
Yep.
The first Warcraft game had elves in it mentioned, and they appear in the second game. But the night elves in the third game, in Warcraft 3, were very different, and they were very obviously inspired by, but nothing like the Drow
Mm-hmm.
from D&D. Were they inspired by them? Absolutely. I don't think anybody could argue they weren't. But they're not even a little like them. Like they're more elf than elf. They're not like we're evil and twisted. They're like, no, all that stuff you hear about nature and stuff, we're that. We're those guys. We are living in the darkness of trees and celebrating when a giant cat eats something because that's nature and it's, blood and claw sage, and we're totally into that. So there's just a lot of that to it. And I think it's a very interesting part of Warcraft is how these pieces, as you're throwing more and more stuff into the pile, it changes other things and they change each other, and you get wildly variant versions of things you might see other places. But Shadowgate, yeah, I could see the Shadowgate influence. I could see, like, we could list dozens of video games that I could think I see influence, not just the stuff we've already been talking about. Yeah, Warcraft has never been subtle about it. I mean, up front, Warcraft is basically, we wanted to do a Warhammer game. They wouldn't give us the license, so we did our own. It's like, we have Warhammer at home. The Warhammer they had at home is Warcraft 1. So yeah, I feel like there's just
Yeah, it goes all the way down to the little references too, right? Like there's Mario and Link characters all the way back in original World of Warcraft. There's like nods to Reservoir Dogs and Infinity War. The old gods, obviously, like being like a letter off from Lovecraft's actual old gods in some cases. And then sometimes those threads get picked up and they become like the main thing that we're focused on in the game for years, which, might have been written in to be almost as much of a one-off as having a Mario character in overalls in Ungoro Crater. But that stuff gets picked up and it's like, wow, Lovecraft heavily influenced it. It's like, yeah, everything influences everything. At this point in time with so many decades of easily accessible media at everyone's consuming all the time, it's such a rich interconnected tapestry that yes, everything is influencing everything. It's hard to pick out the specific things, especially since everything comes before now was influenced by other stuff, and you can still be influenced by the stuff that was written in the 1930s because you could just go read it.
Yeah, and I mean, again, watch what happens next, because what's happening in Midnight, influenced by a bunch of stuff that you probably have seen. Not saying that it isn't great, because it is, but just look through that lens. Look through it through the lens of what pop culture or what things from the past could have possibly influenced this. And I think you're going to be surprised at how much you'll be able to pull out of it or see the references to. A lot of good stuff there, and a lot of stuff that make, again, this beautiful Warcraft universe that we all enjoy even better. But I think that's going to do it for us today, friends. I do want to thank you for joining us on this wonderful episode of Lore Watch. And to remind you that this is only possible due to your generous contributions at patreon.com/blizzardwatch. Your continued support means that this podcast site and community is able to thrive and grow. Blizzard Watch supporters enjoy super benefits like early access to our podcast, better chance at having your question answered on our podcast queue, and an ads reset experience. I would like to remind you that if you can't support us through Patreon, We understand times are tough. There are other ways to support us. You can go ahead and share our content with your friends and family or people that you think might be interested, which I do want to give a quick shout out to Rob, who is one of our listeners who I heard was pimping our episodes for people in his circle. So thank you very much, Rob, for doing that. But that does matter, right? So thank you you can do that. You can share our content. You can like our content on the platform that you're listening it on. You can leave comments on it. Tell us, just even one word responses like cool or really enjoyed it. Any of that stuff really matters. It helps serve our content through the algorithm to more people. And that does help just as much. And then I do want to remind everybody that if you do have questions for this or any of our podcasts, be sure to send those in to podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that it is for, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. You can also send us those messages on Discord. We have the Q and Podcast Questions channel set aside for everybody. Same rules apply. But if you are that Patreon subscriber, it's a little extra thank you for helping us keep the lights on. We have the Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel where we tend to look there first. With that, folks, we'll see you next week.